Hello, it's Snappy Chat. I'm Christine Bell. I'm super excited to be back here again. Today, I'm really so excited for this session with Michael. So we'll introduce Michael shortly because this is all about learning and growing together. And Michael, I can't wait to hear from you because you are a business leader. You got an MBA, you teach the MBA as well, and you run a business as well. So I know I can learn so much from you around the US market and in general around, how do we best position ourselves and how do we grow and scale a business? So I'm very excited for that. But I'll hand over to you and please tell us a little bit more about yourself because I, want to introduce you to the world on LinkedIn. You're already on there, but I know you're growing as we go. What did you grow last year? 4,000 or something? A lot.
Yes, yeah, I added about 4,500 new contacts, which I was really very happy about. I've made a lot of good contacts with friends, colleagues, got a little bit of business out of it, but most importantly, I learned a lot from the new people that I met. So that was, for me, time well spent, and it reinforced the value of really participating like that, meeting people all over the world, which is one of my favorite things to do.
I just want to say we already have Royce on here. Royce is in Arizona. Great to see you, Royce. Thanks you for being here.
Hey,
and we've got Aaron as well. Great to see you.
Hi, Aaron.
Yeah, so please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're up to these days, because I know you do a lot of amazing things.
Yes, so I spent the majority of my early career in corporate executive roles, and I was able to do a lot of international travel as a result, and it really made me become very interested in doing business in different parts of the world. I ended up along that way. I ended up going to postgraduate school and ended up getting a degree in international business management, which for me it was amazing. I didn't realize how much I liked it until I did it. I did a lot of traveling for personal and for business, but it was something that really made me look at things a bit differently. So in 2023, I left. I'm sorry, 2022. I'm losing track of time. 2022, I left my corporate role. And up until then, I had some. I've dabbled in some startups. I still have 2 other businesses, not related to Syntegence, but I got together with some close colleagues and some investors, and we launched Syntegence in September of 2023. And the objective was, how can we help companies enter the U.S. market? And along with that, we started looking around into different areas. Eastern Europe was our first, specifically Poland was our first point of contact. But now we have team members in Poland and in Hungary, and we're also working with some team members that will be some clients that we'll be able to talk about in the not too distant future, coming over maybe from India.
Very exciting. So you went global fast, 2 years in business, and boom, there you are. That's amazing. Some of us take a long time to build. Yeah.
Well, it's just what's amazing is the technology we have at our fingertips now compared to the way it would have been, say, 20 years ago. I mean, you can start a company. They call it Born Global, because you can start a company and immediately have different opportunities from different parts of the world and compete from a technology standpoint with most of the large companies because of all the tools, like what we're doing now. Christine, I don't know how much further away you and I could be right now, but I feel like you're right next door. Right?
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. And I actually have to thank LinkedIn for this, because I have met so many amazing people, including Royce and other people on LinkedIn. And literally, I have picked up friends and business opportunities on LinkedIn. So I do want to give a shout out to LinkedIn as well, because it is an amazing platform if you use it in a way that actually help you build your brand and help you position yourself right. And actually you go out and make contact with people too.
Yes. So I think, just to focus on LinkedIn for a moment, when I first started, I was experimenting. I'm still experimenting. It's just the way it is. It's a constant learning experience. But one of the things I wanted to be really careful not to do was I did not want to create sales pitch types of sessions. I did not think that would be the best use of everyone's time that was putting towards that. Yeah. So I tried to really contribute what I would call, or at least what I would hope to try to achieve, would be some thought-provoking topics. And I found that when I started to do that, I started to get a lot of people reaching out to me, direct messages, and again, not the selling part, just asking questions, sharing ideas. And that for me was my favorite part.
Yeah, it's about adding value. And that's why I do like LinkedIn. It's much more around adding value than it is to sell directly, where other, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but other channels out there sometimes is a little bit more hardcore sales, right? And
Yes.
Sponsored, a lot of sponsors ad, where I find I enjoy flicking through LinkedIn and reading your stuff, or learning from Royce or from other people that I look on LinkedIn to learn from as well. So for me, it's about learning and growing, which is also what Snappy Chat is about, learning and growing together, which is I so appreciate for you to be here as well and be part of this. I want to know, and I just want to say hello to Usman as well. Thank you for being here. What is one of the big challenges you faced building your business, or in general when you were in leading other businesses as well?
Right. So I think what's interesting about a startup / scale up, the challenges are always there. They just evolve. But if I think about from the beginning, I'm going to have to say there were two main challenges. The first challenge, I think, was to find partners that truly stand out in their prospective markets. Now,
yeah,
that may sound like it may sound challenging, or maybe not so much. But one of the challenges that I had was that my partners, my business partners, they have experience in venture capital. They're entrepreneurs. They tend to have the one common element that all entrepreneurs have, which is perpetual optimism. So I had to really work with them to basically vet down, like, what are we going to work on? I didn't want to take on clients that we just really had no understanding of what they did, that were not related. So we spent a good bit of time trying to really focus in on some of the clients that really stand out. And I think we have a nice portfolio of that now. The second challenge, I think, was establishing some agreed upon entry strategies. Now, when you're entering this market, it could produce an illusion just based on the numbers, the size of things. So I think that it could be attractive, but sometimes the realism of timelines and the messaging itself, and the need for local partnerships, that's something I think that takes time to go through, to realize that this market operates very differently from most other markets.
And then you're talking about the U.S. market now?
U.S. market, yes. Sorry, yes, U.S. market.
Yes, yeah. And I love to, because I think there's a lot of us out there in the rest of the world who goes, wow, America, that looks like an amazing big market. And we want to enter the market. And obviously it's easier if you are in America. I think maybe you can tell me differently. Maybe it's not. But it's like, what is the key things we can learn about it? That's a huge question, by the way. But for overseas companies who are trying to enter the US market, what would you say are some of the key things that they need to be aware of? And I'm wondering whether, I want to just say hello to you, Landa, for being here, and Philippe is here as well. So thank you for being here. So over to you, Michael.
So I'm going to say that, there's a few things. If you look at just the metrics, and you look at some of the larger cities in the U.S., New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, many of those cities, the annual revenue is sometimes exceeds other countries. So just by the nature of that, there is a view, sometimes external view of what it looks like here, is that there's going to be incredible opportunity, and there's so much money going around, and that's true. But there are also some challenges with that, and some of the challenges, I think, come with setting a messaging that's correct, dealing with some of the challenges that go with that large numbers, hyper competition, and a very short attention span. So you have to get the messaging right. Otherwise, you most likely will not get a second shot at a decision maker that has influence. The other thing I'd like to just add too, this is just my observation, and I'm sure maybe other people would have their own. I'd love to hear it. I think relationships are globally important, but I think that in the U.S., relationships tend to be more transactional than long-term, like it would be, say, in China, okay? Where it's a long-term buildup. In the US, people can do business with each other even if they don't know each other, as long as it's governed properly and there's trust. So that changes a lot, though, when you think about the timeline and some of the dynamics of how you enter the market.
That's a really great insight. And I think it takes us back to culture as well, because I have worked across the world, in terms of different parts of the world, both Africa, Asia, Europe, US, Australia. And I think it's so interesting because the US, culture does matter in terms of how we build trust, I think. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that as well, in terms of understanding the culture of America and how important that is.
Trust is absolutely important. I think people could do business with people they don't like, but they have to have trust. There has to be a level of trust. Otherwise, the risk is too high.
Yeah, fair enough. And how do we build trust with Americans? How do we do that when we come from the outside? Yeah, because that's where, with my messaging and building trust, I might think I'm doing it right, but it doesn't fit the American market potentially.
Right. So I think that to build trust in the US, there has to be transparency. There has to be, most importantly, the message should not be something that you think the local market wants to hear. So for instance, if you're coming into this market from another country, I'm going to say Eastern Europe, for instance, if you open up a corporation in the state of Delaware, and then you say you're a US company, it's going to be a very thin veil, because it could be checked very easily. So rather than try to create an image of something that may not be accurate, it's much better to go in and to focus in on what makes your business special. What can you bring? What gap can you fill in this market that's not already here? How can you do that? Is it cost leadership? Is it innovation? Is it both? Those are the things that help build trust here, when you could prove that.
Wonderful. And is that part of what you help companies, your clients, do as well?
Yes, all the time. So when I look back, at the beginning, I think about some of the things that we did that may not have been the best way to do it. I think at the beginning we focused more on the excellence of the product and its competitive ability. I think that we did not spend enough time early on focusing in on the nuances about what this market is about and how to successfully scale here, timelines and messaging, things like that. So what we did after the first year is, now when we take on a new client, we have a 6-week collaboration program that talks about cultural differences, risk aversion here versus maybe in the home country, different levels of hierarchy when it comes to messaging. There's a low power distance in the US. So people, subordinates will just speak freely with their managers. And sometimes if you come from a country with a higher power distance, it may not be understood properly. It may make people uncomfortable. So we try to take through that part of it. And we talk about how to deal with the messaging, especially when it comes to the competition in the local market.
And I think that's such important insights. And if you don't mind me sharing, having worked in Asia, one time I was actually presenting to Bangkok Bank, yeah? And I had no cultural awareness, yeah? I had come in, we'd done the work with Visa. Visa was the client. We'd done the work. They're like, can you present to Bangkok Bank? I'm like, sure. I came in on a Monday wearing black. Everyone else was wearing yellow because it was the old king's birthday and he was born on a Monday and it was yellow day. So everyone was wearing yellow and I was wearing black, the last color to wear. And in the meeting, in the presentation, they kind of fell asleep.
Wow.
And
really?
I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. And there was nothing wrong with it, but they took me to lunch afterwards. And then they said, what do you do for a living? And I thought, wow, obviously I missed something in the culturally. I was off. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, what do you think? What do you think caused that?
I think I was totally unaware of the cultural part there in terms of how you engage people, and I had assumed that they knew about the types of brands. I think I'm cutting it. I think I didn't prepare enough, assuming that they knew what I was doing. I just assumed they knew what I was doing, so I didn't really set that up correctly. And my partner Visa didn't either. And two, also in Asia, and nothing wrong with that. Sometimes they are actually on their phone, or they kind of might close their eyes and listen or do other things, and it's not considered wrong. It's completely fine. Where in Australia, that would be considered possibly a little bit disrespectful, but it's not seen that way in Asia.
Right.
And that was more like for me learning, going, wow, actually I'm learning something here. Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's a constant learning experience, which is what I love the most about this. And, I mean, some situations you really can't prepare for it, depending on where you are, but the best that you can do. And I teach at Pace University. I teach a lot of international business courses. And one of the things I try to make everybody focus in on is that you're not going to have the answers. You just have to be prepared to see the signs. And that's the most important thing. And I think that if you can do that, then you can try to work and figure it out the best you can, as long as you're aware of it. It's the worst is if you're not aware of maybe being misaligned and things they end up with a different outcome.
Yeah. And I so love what you're saying, because actually teaching at the university, UNSW here, business school, first year, not MBA, we have a lot of international students, and from all over the world, America, Europe, a lot of from China, India, etc. So it's kind of like the UN put together, and everyone has to work in teams. And now it's suddenly getting all these cultural differences, and especially around messaging and communication style, where you'll see the West, including, with the US especially, but also the West is more direct versus other indirect communication styles, right?
That's absolutely correct. And, so one of the things I do also with, at the university level is, many of my clients come from countries where English is not their native language. I'm always impressed with the ability to be multilingual. Unlike myself, I only speak one language. So I'm always impressed with that. But there's two things that I focus in on when we talk about, say, in the area of negotiations, international, global negotiations. One is, I'll use an example of when there's a common language, like British English compared to American English. And I'll pick phrases that are said and how they're interpreted and what they really meant. And it's some of it's comical, but it gives the point of, hey, look, even though the language is the same language, it's used very differently in certain situations. The other thing, and this is again for negotiations, I think is important. And Christine, you'll probably experience this with your international travel. It's the usage of silence. And Americans and most Western cultures tend to be very uncomfortable with silence, where Eastern cultures are okay with it. And if you look at that, you look at the power of listening and what you can get from not saying anything, especially when you're in a critical large deal negotiation, it's absolutely important. And that's some of the things that we try to look at, because when negotiating all over the world, how you set up that conversation and how you manage it really impacts the outcomes.
So true. And it all comes back to communication and understanding our own communication style, and perhaps even our conflict style, and how we're wired in terms of how we try to come across in our best way, right? Which is, with good intentions, but sometimes it's a mismatch. And I think that's really important to understand about the US market. I went to high school in the US, I have to admit, for 1 year, and I was only 15, and I was in culture shock. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to have that. I had no idea what I was walking into, but there was culture shock, and it's such a wake-up call, I think, in a good way, because it really, I think, from my perspective, allows us to, if we want to, look more deeply at ourselves, and by doing that, we now can understand how we can change ourselves too when we need to. Like you said, like you have to learn around the pause, or you have to learn around how you set up the right power structure in different cultures too.
Right. Yes. And the thing, what I think is really important is, and this is global, if somebody believes that you can help them achieve something that they can't do on their own, or you can help them achieve that quicker or better, then they're going to be willing to listen. And I think that the messaging has to be on what makes your proposal unique. And it has to always be directed on the audience that you're speaking with, not what you have to sell. And that's a very important part of it, because a lot of mistakes are made that way, especially when you have, say, new entrepreneurs or people that have, startup founders. They become very close to the product and they really believe in it. And that's beautiful. It's a wonderful thing, but adjusting that messaging to be not so much what it can do, but what it can do for you is really critical to get to that next step towards scaling.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying that. And I will say I admire America. And the thing I learned the most from Americans is actually selling. Because in Europe, at least in Denmark, where I grew up, there's definitely been it might have changed, and I haven't lived there for a long time, so I put that caveat in there. But there was definitely in the sense of, you should never try and sell yourself, and you definitely, tall puppy syndrome. So you definitely should not try and make yourself too grand or, all those things. Where I find with Americans, there's a much more in terms of, I'm speaking generally around Americans, but it's a compliment in terms of you have learned to speak really well from a young age and debate and be direct and have conversation. And somewhere along the line, there's less concerns around selling, like you're more comfortable with it, or at least comes across that way.
So I would say with the US, and we're not talking about any kind of politics, of course, would never do that. But what I would say, just from a business standpoint, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, the US, in my humble opinion, is the most optimistic country when it comes to future business opportunities. It's just the way it is. And even when there's failure and there are mechanisms in place to deal with that, you pick yourself up and you go on and you do it again. And this time you do it better. And that's kind of a cultural aspect of the country, I think.
Yeah. And I love that because it builds resilience and that sense of get back on the horse and you are in charge and you are responsible for yourself and your future, which I love, rather than waiting for someone else to do it for you. Royce is saying, read the room. Absolutely. We always need to read the room, but sometimes we can read it incorrectly when we don't understand the culture. Yeah. Or we can get scared by it.
Yeah, I'm going to say one more thing about it is too, that just by the history of the country, there's very low level of risk aversion is low. And, if you look at, it's a unique society because everybody that's here is from someplace else. Yeah. And it hasn't been that long. In the really big scheme of things. So that gives that kind of resilience, that low level of risk aversion and the ability to really put yourself out there for future opportunity.
Yeah. Wonderful. And in terms of, I'm assuming, I could be wrong. I know you said there's a lot of competition in the American market and you need to find how you stand out and how you can offer something that's better for them. But is there any concerns around working with companies from overseas that we have to be aware of? Because I assume you talked about trust, and sometimes trust is perhaps easier built when we're in the same country or even can see each other. There's a sense of, well, I know where you're coming from. I understand the laws in this country, right?
Well, so that's some of that is exactly what we focus in on, and what we try to do is it's really critical that we select the right partners, because what we're doing is really leveraging our network, not me only, but my partners and our extended network, because that's been built on trust over many years. So, but even that, if we make the wrong decisions or our partners deliver less than where we said they would, that could be damaging. So that's a risk there. But I want to say one more thing about the competition. Just because a market may be competitive, if you can find the right niche market where the large companies don't want to do it because it's just too costly to go after it, you could build a 7-figure business on something that's right there in the open that none of the big players want to go for. So that's what we also do. We help look for that. So rather than coming here and thinking you're going to compete with a Fortune 100 publicly traded company, maybe there's a small spot that this can fit in perfectly, and you can get in there and really get a competitive advantage, an early mover that nobody is even paying attention to. Not that they don't know about it, but that they're not really interested in devoting resources there at this point in time. And then if it does become successful,
I love that, and I definitely want to talk to.
If it does become successful, they could buy you, and that's nothing better than a nice profitable exit.
True. I definitely want to love to get more from your brain when we're off camera and stuff, because I'm so interested in the American market, and my husband is American. We want to move there one day, and it's well, how do I build a business that can allow me to move there, because it costs money to move countries, quite a bit actually. So that's one of the considerations. What can I do? So I definitely want to one day, if I may, wreck your brain on this, because in terms of finishing up shortly, what would be your one recommendation to people listening going, wow, I want to learn about the American market. I want to figure out how to get in there, how to get my messaging right. What would you say is the first thing they should be doing if they're sitting overseas and they're just sort of like going, what can I do?
Okay, so I'm not going to give one recommendation. I'm going to give a few that are all related. I'm going to say, invest in the market immersion. So really, before investing heavily in the market expansion, focus in on what it's like to be in this market. Test your narrative by speaking with prospects, and see what kind of feedback you get in an honest way, because what you say may not get interpreted exactly the way you want to say it. So tweaking it's important. Understanding the sales motion, because the sales motion here is different. You may show up at a meeting, and even though you gave material beforehand, they're probably not going to read it, and you'll be meeting them for the first time. So that's going to be something that's a bit different from other areas. And then really adapt your strategy to the U.S. business mindset. And we talked a little bit about that before. In closing, I'd say, winning in the U.S. market, in my humble opinion, it's not about entering fast. It's really about entering prepared for the long haul, and that takes time.
I love that, and that's such good advice, because I think sometimes we're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to do that. No. You've got to just slow down, get your positioning right, work out what you're really about, and then learn the culture and how to best sell the American style way. Yeah. So you build trust because it's more familiar, and we trust things that are more familiar.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. And Aaron says, love the conversation. Thank you both. So that's great. Appreciate you being here. So in closing, how can people reach out to you, etc. on LinkedIn, I assume?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn, and I think you have my information on there. So yes. I even if it's just to say hello and chat offline, I'd love to have conversations. Many of you, we've already been in sessions together. I've been on the in the chat with you. So, but please always feel free. Send me a note. I'll make time for us to just sit down and chat, have some tea or coffee. So yes, and I just want to thank you, Christine, so much for inviting me. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being on here. I really appreciate it too. And I appreciate the opportunity to learn from you as well, because you got so much experience that is valuable to all of us. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for everyone being here too.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to finish up now.